Hello everyone, welcome to the new week and welcome to episode 68 of Meet the Farmers. I'm your host Ben Eagle and thank you very much for joining me this week. If you didn't hear last week's episode, that was the first in this new format for the show. We're now weekly, which hopefully from your point of view, you'll now know when to actually listen rather than episodes being released randomly as they have been in the past. Monday morning at 9am is the new launch time for episodes, but you can of course tune in at any time during the week at your leisure, or indeed listen back to the bank of episodes previous, which are all available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts and others, or you can visit my blog site, which is thinkingcountry.com. Now let's take a look at what's coming up on the show today. I'll be speaking to Matthew Hawthorne in the Farmer Focus section today. Matthew is farm manager of the Euston Estate in Suffolk, and we'll also be playing everyone's favourite new game, Guess the Crop. Thank you to the few of you who actually got in touch last week with your answer. You all have a point on the board and you know who you are. First though, let's have a look at the news from the past week.
In the news.
The headlines this week are again dominated by coronavirus and its impact. We of course learnt last Thursday that the UK is under another 3 weeks of lockdown in the way that we've been getting used to over the past month. The dairy sector continues to be under a lot of pressure, and despite a conference call meeting last week between farming union representatives, processor chief executives and DEFRA Secretary George Eustace last Wednesday, it looks unlikely that DEFRA will be providing additional support outside the existing support packages. These include the government's coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, which has had a mixed reception, so still tough. Very tough news and a difficult situation there for lots of dairy businesses. Away from dairy, there is concern about who will be picking Britain's fruit and veg. Peak demand will be around mid-May, but the expected numbers of seasonal workers from Eastern Europe aren't coming because of corona, so there's the question of how crops will be harvested. The government is expected to launch a Pick for Britain campaign in the coming weeks, and thousands of Brits have already been in touch with farms looking for pickers. Meanwhile, coronavirus has also presented new opportunities for growers, and a lot of growers have started their own veg boxes and are selling direct through deliveries. Sky lanterns have been in the news again. One particular sky lantern company came up with the idea of encouraging people to release a sky lantern as a way of showing support for NHS workers, and the money raised would go to the NHS, but farmers and firefighters have hit back against the idea. After all, these lanterns can cause immense damage in the countryside, especially with it being so dry at the moment. Wheat prices experienced a bit of a fall so far this month, after the gains they made at the onset of the rise of corona cases last month. Futures prices have also fallen since last month. Traders are currently looking closely at the weather in southern Russia and parts of Europe, as it's been particularly dry, and this is likely to impact on prices. So, corona is the focus, and it's a storm that we're all going to have to ride our way through, being thankful for the amazing job that healthcare workers are doing right now, and taking a quiet and hopeful satisfaction that it seems that the social distancing and isolation strategies seem to be working. That is the news for now.
In the news.
So, it's time for our main feature of today's show, rebranded as Farmer Focus. Although in reality, it's just like all the other old episodes, just in a smaller, shorter version. And for this, I was really pleased to speak to Matthew Hawthorne from the Euston Estate in Suffolk. I should also thank the Chadacre Agricultural Trust at this point, who support the podcast in order to profile food and farming in Suffolk and adjoining counties. But for now, it's over to Matthew.
It's Farmer Focus.
I've got Matthew Hawthorne on the line, who is farm manager at the Euston Estate in Suffolk, which is a 10,500 acre estate owned by the Dukes of Grafton. The farmland of the estate comes to over 6,000 acres, and the rotation typically includes wheat and barley, but there's also sugar beet, They grow some maize for AD, some rye for AD. There's potatoes, onions, carrots, and parsnips. There's 100 red poll cows, and some outdoor pigs as well. Further, there's about 1,200 acres in HLS and various conservation schemes. And outside the farmland, there's 1,500 acres of woodland. Euston Farms was awarded the accolade of Greenest Farming Business in the Creating the Greenest County Awards back in 2016. Matthew, thanks for talking to me. Apart from having, I'm assuming, pretty sandy soils, tell me about your part of the world and the Brecks generally. What's it like to live and work there?
So yeah, 2/3 of the farm I would say is typical Breckland sand, with the third of the farm that's sort of more towards Bury St Edmunds being slightly more bodied soil. So that's your area for your wheat production and the sort of cereal cropping, and then obviously the Breckland sand lends itself perfectly to vegetable production.
What about you? Did you always want to work in farming?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I started off Bury St Edmunds, and a friend of mine had a farm. There's no farming in the family.
Okay.
A friend of mine at school had a farm, so we used to spend some time there.
Yeah.
And that's where I initially got the bug. Yeah.
And you never looked back.
Never looked back.
And getting to work at Euston, how did you get into your current role? And was it a gradual step up through the ranks?
Yeah, it was. So when I actually started agricultural training, my parents lived in Sussex at the time. They had a hotel on the south coast, and we was only down there about 5 years. But I was down there at the time when it was time to go to college and get some education.
Yeah.
So I actually done my education at Plumpton Agricultural College.
Okay, yeah.
Just outside Brighton, and my grandparents lived in one of the villages that Euston farm round, a village called Honington. And when talking to my grandparents one day about my sandwich year, they said, "Oh, why didn't you write a letter to a guy called Mr. John Farrow, who was the farm manager at the time?"
Yeah.
Which I did, and I came up for the interview, and that's sort of where we've got to today.
And I suppose, yeah. I mean, what advice would you give to somebody interested in following in your footsteps and ultimately becoming a farm manager, but taking those first steps into ag if you're not from a farming background?
I think where a lot of people go wrong is they haven't got that grit and determination and longevity of service in them. And I think maybe in farming, it's not so relevant, but in working on an estate, they look at the person really three-dimensionally. So it's not just about your ability to grow another half a ton of wheat. They want somebody reliable, solid. They're interested in the character. What is this guy going to do for my business in the community?
Yep.
Is he somebody that you might bump into at church? They're looking for a lot of other things as well as just good crop husbandry.
Yep. In terms of the rest of the team on the estate, how many people are employed on the estate? How big's your team?
I think the total payroll was something like 32 people.
Okay.
I have 8 full-time tractor drivers and a student working alongside me. So that's sort of a fairly small team. But a lot of our vegetable land enterprise, that's all supported by Abries from Wretham, which is just the other side of Thetford.
Yep.
So our guys do get involved with vegetables, but we're not supplying the full workforce for vegetables.
Yeah. What's a typical day like for you?
Every day is different and interesting. Every day has got laughter in it. There's not a day when I don't laugh. There'll be something funny, or the characters that I've maybe propagated to work here. They were funny guys when they first come, but I allow it to be funny. So every day's got a bit of laughter in it, and always some silly story. But yeah, it's just very, very diverse. And I've told thousands of people, if this was about 2,000 acres of wheat and 2,000 acres of barley and 2,000 acres of rape and 1,000 acres of sugar beet, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
It's the other stuff. It's the game keeping, the deer stalking, the house, Euston Hall. It's the parkland. It's the woodland. It's the 32 people that I bump into on my journey round. It's the builder, the plumber, the electrician. They're the people that make it the best job in Suffolk without shadow of a doubt.
Do you think the future for these traditional estates looks healthy?
I think the future does, but I think they've been through a really bad time, from today going back 20 years, with succession planning, inheritance tax, a lot of these taxation and these legal things about the business has brought a lot of these businesses to a halt. Maybe the person who owned the estate didn't have farming knowledge and was relying on tenant farmers, or other people coming in, agents advice, all that sort of stuff. But at Euston, we've always been involved with an agent, and in this one it's Bidwell's, but they've never steered us.
Yeah.
They've advised us but never steered us. And I think if there's some good guys in the workforce, Andrew Blenkiron, the director here, myself, the farm manager, I think that you can get through all these challenges. But I think some of the owners that maybe don't know so much about their business, I think they struggle. So I think the future's good, but I think they've come through real challenging times, and we've seen the demise of a lot of big estates because of taxation and, putting it bluntly, lack of knowledge about what their business can do.
Tell me about your rotation, and how experimental are you with what you grow? Do you tend to be fairly typical with what you're growing? Is it working for you?
I wouldn't say we're experimental with what we grow. I am quite experimental sometimes with how we grow it.
Okay.
I don't believe in changing the wheel, but I think the way the wheel goes round may be open to a little bit of investigation.
Yep.
But there's basically two rotations. So does the rotation include veg, yes or no? So it will be, if it doesn't include veg, it would be maybe 2 mazes, a sugar beet, a wheat, a barley, another rye or something like that. And then where it does contain vegetables, then the rotation is a lot more complex. And, it typically goes potatoes, wheat, into barley, into onions. So yeah, very, very varied. There's no sort of, I couldn't even give you 2 hard and fast rules as to how the rotation works.
Yeah.
And we get steered a lot by Aberys at Wretham.
Yeah.
They say we need more potatoes this year, or we need more carrots this year. So depending on soil types and what they're looking for, and early and late planting and irrigation capacity, that's a massive thing here, because you can't have all your vegetables up one corner of the farm. They have to be evenly spread throughout the pipe network to irrigate effectively. So there's a lot of factors apart from the previous crop that influence how we lay out our rotation.
What about your maize and your rye crops for AD? How long have you been doing that?
We've had an AD plant for 6 years. It's owned by another company, but we provide the feedstock to go in it. So yeah, that's all sort of semi-new to us still. We're doing some double mazes, which seems to work well. But yeah, apart from that, it's included in the sort of standard cropping.
What were some of your key challenges of farming in the Brecks?
Springtime is becoming more and more challenging. I'll never forget, my mum's birthday is the 28th of March, and we was irrigating on the 28th of March, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And you just think to yourself, what the hell is going on? It was like 22 degrees at the end of March, and we was irrigating onions. And, the spring really is a lottery now. I can pretty much predict the summer. You're going to get some sun, you're going to get some rain normally towards the end. Winter times are normally wet and miserable and don't do people a lot of good. We don't normally get any snow, but spring is literally, I don't know what's going to happen, and spring planting sugar beet, with soil that blows away, and trying to get a cover crop established before you plant the sugar beet to protect the sugar beet as they grow from the wind and the erosion, drilling onions, irrigation, trying to get spraying done. Spring is a challenging time for us.
Yeah. I've seen there's been a fair amount of investment with regards to irrigation over the years.
Yeah, we had an irrigation system put in the 70s, a tiny one that would irrigate probably 300 acres, right near the estate office where Home Farm is. And then 2006, we put a 100 million gallon reservoir in and started a pipe network. In 2012, we put another irrigation reservoir in. And every year we continue to expand the pipe network to take the water into new areas of the farm. We've sort of finished pretty much now.
Yeah.
There's about 5,000 acres that's irrigatable, and there's 40 kilometres of underground main that transports water around the farm. So it's a massive, massive system.
What's going to be your biggest challenge moving forward, do you reckon?
We're obviously all keen to find out about the new support system for farming and how that will roll out, what that will look like, how countryside it is, and how farming it is, and how wildlife orientated it is. So yeah, we see that as a challenge. Obviously, it's an opportunity too, because we can restructure what we do, and we're very lucky here that it is a real wildlife rich area. We've got woodland, we've got hot sand, we've got heathland, we've got river meadows. There's lots of things that we can easily adapt our estate to meet criteria set out by support payments.
Absolutely. So even though, because obviously you're one of the bigger boys out there, you'll be losing the greatest percentage of you'll be in that highest tier of losing BPS first. But you've got enough strings to your bow to be flexible enough to stage that through.
Correct. Yeah, and like I say, we've got countless opportunities to make something work for whatever the new scheme wants us to do.
Yeah.
We can crop it all and grow potatoes on it all, or we can put wildlife corridors in, new plantings of trees, heathland restoration, all sorts of things. The list is endless. So no, we're in a lot better position than a lot of people are.
Yeah. What do you get up to away from farming?
I like boats.
Okay.
I don't. People say, "Oh, do you go sailing? Do you go out on one, whatever?" But I don't do any of that. I like looking at them.
Yeah.
I've got a boat of my own, which is a long project. It's only a 16-foot open fishing boat, but it's been under construction for probably 6 or 7 years. So I need to get myself into gear and get that finished. But yeah, I do like the whole thing of boats, and I'm not talking like your white boat that goes to Marbella and all that sort of thing. I'm talking about a Cornish fishing boat and all the character and the part of the engine around that. So I like that.
Nice.
I do a lot with education. So I like, I'm a school governor at my local primary, and I like supporting a lot of education in farming, do quite a lot of that on the estate. So yeah, a lot of times taken up by getting the next school visit organised, getting to the next seminar about teaching kids and all that sort of thing. So
yeah, I was going to say, because having done the bit of research I did for this recording, when you Google you, definitely a lot that comes up on outreach. I mean, that's super important for the future of the industry, right?
It is, and I think a lot of people. And when I started out doing it, sort of 5 years ago, I got really into it. When I started out doing it, I think people thought that I was after the next apprentice to. Be a clean cleaner and then do a bit of chain harrowing and then go roller and then be my drillman. I wasn't after that at all. What I want the children to do that live locally, and no matter where they live, I want them to understand what's going on in the fields. That's all I want them to do.
Yeah.
When you tell a 6-year-old that sugar grows in a field, it blows their mind. They don't know where it comes from, but to think it grows in a field is like, Matthew, you are joking. What the hell is this bloke on about? But I just want them to know, when the muddy trailer pulls out on the road in November and it's lashing down a rain, and mum says to the child in the back, "Why do these farmers have to go on the road in the rain?" I want the child to look through the headrest and say, "Because on that trailer is sugar beet, and you can harvest it in the winter months." That's what I want to happen.
Have you had some good questions from kids over the years?
Yeah, blow your mind. And I'm not going to say all the basic ones about where does milk come from, Tesco, and all that sort of stuff. The children that I get involved with are far deeper and more inquisitive than that sort of level of question and answer. But yeah. You get some blinders, absolute blinders.
Yeah. Right. If it's okay with you, we do this thing on the podcast called the 1 Minute Soapbox. Which it needn't be a rant, and everyone always asks me this. So, does it have to be a rant about something? It could be something positive. It could be a local cause. It could be an interest, or it could be something to do with farming. But yeah, so you get 1 minute to talk about anything that you want. Have you got any subject in mind?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I've got 1 minute on the clock. So you've got 1 minute to introduce your subject and talk on it. Matthew Hawthorne in 1 minute, starting now.
My subject is mental health, but two-pronged. So I am totally supportive of mental health and what's happening in the world today. What I'm really, really, really concerned about is bandwagons and people having a bad day, and because they've heard a lot about mental health, think they've got a mental health issue. And I'm doing my mental health first aid course in a couple of weeks. But I'm really concerned for people who haven't got a lot of hope because they're having a bad time, divorce, all the hundreds of things, cancer, all of the sort of things like that. I'm really concerned about where this boundary is about I've got mental health issues, look after me, versus I'm having a bad day, look after me. And I'm really concerned about that. And like I say, I am totally on board with it. I'm more on board with it than somebody who maybe listened to this and hasn't got an opinion on it. But I am really worried about people just joining the bandwagon and saying they've got issues. Every element of my life that I go into, whether it's farming, whether it's ringing a supplier for a bag of seed, whether it's meeting people on the street, there is lots of snowflakes about. And I'm concerned about the grit and determination of my community, generally speaking. My community could be the UK or Thetford, Bury St Edmunds, Cambridge, whatever. But I'm just concerned about people who have spent too much money on an iPhone 11, who suddenly can't pay their electric bill, suddenly thinking they've got a mental health issue. So that's what I'm concerned about at the moment. And like I say, fully supportive of it. I know it's out there. I know people who have suffered from it and talked to them a long time about it. But I'm also concerned that people who just need to sort themselves out and get on with life are going to join this bandwagon of, I need help, I need government support, I need whatever.
That was a lot longer than a minute, but I wanted to let that run on because I think it is a really important subject to talk about. It's something that we've delved in on the podcast a lot.
It is. And I think there's loads of people talking about it, but I think a lot of people are thinking what I've said about, bloody hell, there's a lot of people out there, just need to get on with it. I have a bad day, I have a bad day once a month, once a week, but I don't think I've got a mental health issue.
Yeah. No, there is a definite difference.
Because the thing is, if we don't help the right people, the help is going to be diluted and ineffective.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I want to help the people who really can't go out of the house and are really scared to go out of the house and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I want to help people who are thinking about taking their own life, but I don't want to help people who have just spent too much on their iPhone and can't afford to feed the baby.
Yeah.
That's just basic responsibility.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been really good having you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. It's really good.
It's Farmer Focus.
Matthew Hawthorne there, the farm manager at the Euston Estate in Suffolk. Huge thanks to Matthew, and if you're a farmer yourself and you're interested in coming on the show and telling people about your farm and what you've got going on, I would love to hear from you. You can contact me on Twitter or Instagram at MTF_podcast, just direct message me on there, or you can email me, and the email address is thinkingcountry, or one word, @gmail.com. Now it's time to guess the crop.
Time to guess the crop. Just tell me what the type of crop is.
Yes, this is Guess the Crop. I'm going to give you 3 clues, and once you have an answer, just send it to me by following the podcast on Twitter or Instagram at MTF_podcast and direct messaging me or emailing thinkingcountry@gmail.com. If you didn't send an answer to last week's mystery crop, there were a few of you. Thank you everyone who did message in. Thanks for playing along. Just listen back to that episode and send me both answers at the same time. There will be a special prize at the end of the year posted to the person with the most correct answers. So honestly, this is well worth getting involved with. Here are your clues for this week's crop. Farmers among you, I promise they will get progressively more difficult, but I'm starting off with some easier ones so that everyone can get some points on the board.
Time to guess that crop. Just tell me what the type of crop is.
Number 1, it's a member of the mustard or cabbage family. Number 2, its seed is the third largest source of vegetable oil in the world. And number 3, and this one does rather give it away, it's known for its bright yellow flowers. So message me or email me your guess.
Time to guess that crop. Just tell me what the type of crop is.
Once again, you can follow the podcast on Twitter or Instagram at MTF_podcast. And the show is now also available on Facebook. Search for Meet the Farmers Podcast. And excitingly, it's also now on YouTube, where you can see extended interviews with some of the guests on the show. That's all we've got time for, but I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay safe and well this week, whatever you're up to. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening so you don't miss another episode. I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next week.